Hey, and welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you made it. I'm so glad you're here. Let's just breathe in and breathe out. We finally made it. Thank you everybody for coming. I'm glad you came to this video in particular because that means you want to learn more about what it means to have your own business in the music or in the film or just in the entertainment industry in general. This is the first step. So thank you so much and enjoy. I would like to introduce you to this wonderful and amazing woman, Andrea Dwyer, who also happens to be my sis and colleague. She is the CEO and founder of Cultivation Media LLC. She was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and credits her homeland in instilling values such as hard work, embracing diversity, and her down-to-earth nature, which she fully applies to her business. She has enjoyed various jobs in the music and film industry as a writer, PR agent, music manager, music showcase curator, festival promotions, and digital marketer. She's also worked with brands such as Essence Festival, Atlanta Film Festival, Atlanta Pride, A3C Festival and Conference, Afropunk, One Music Fest, and more. One of her career highlights includes videos she co-produced at A3C 2017, which included Nas, Just Blaze, A-Track, Dave East, Saba, Jenna Lucas, Cody Shane, and my personal favorite, Dun Dun Chicken Head, Project Pat. Hey girl!
I want you to let folks know, so we've known each other for a few years, and you mentioned in my bio when I worked at A3C. So I love that story about how we met, and so let the folks know, let them know how we met and what you did to get my attention to ultimately photograph. Was it 2016 or 2017?
2017.
2017. So let them know what happened.
The whole story?
I mean, condense it. A minute or two. The
Okay.
short version.
Okay. So how we met was I wanted to go to Atlanta, and I didn't know like what was happening. It was just pretty much just like a real of faith. What it really was. I just woke up and I was like, I want to go to Atlanta. I want to be, I want to do something. And so I was Googled. I bought a plane ticket, round trip there. And then I went online to see what was happening because I just bought a ticket. And it turns out A3C Festival was happening. That's when I like first heard of it actually, and I googled it, and then I went on Instagram and I was looking through all these people, and then I found Andrea, and then I emailed her saying Sydney Rose in all caps, and I sent her this whole paragraph telling her I'm a leap of faith. Literally still my transparent like leap of faith, bought a ticket, hey can I like shoot something, and that's how it happened.
At that time, I'd already put my team together. I'd already done my budget for my video, my photography, for social, for everything, influencer. And so when she reached out, I was like, should I reach back out to her or should I just like keep it moving? But happy to say that I responded, and she worked her butt off during A3C that year, and she did some really cool things that attracted a lot of industry folks and followers for her. And so I think ultimately out of that relationship and out of that situation, she benefited greatly, and her and I have since been building a professional and a personal relationship. She's my sis, and so yeah, grateful we met then.
Yeah, that was 3 years ago.
Yeah, which is crazy. Time's flown by.
Yeah. So tell us, when and why did Crown Cultivation Media start?
So just to talk a little bit about my background before I started the company. I went to school for communications back in school. I worked briefly at a newspaper. Life happened. I left the industry for media in particular for some years, and back in 2013 I started to write again. And so from that experience until now, I've accrued just a lot of experience. As Sydney said, I've done a lot of different things in media, artist management, PR, digital marketing, so on and so forth. And so like just with all the skill sets that I've had over the years, a lot of my colleagues, would say things like, yo, you're a boss, like, why don't you have your own company? And I would just laugh it off, right? But like secretly at home, I was plotting. Like I
Right.
look back on like, things I write a lot. And so like I would jot things down. I have like stacks and stacks of notebooks. And so like when I comb through, or even, I'm pretty organized. So like when I look at like Google Docs of company ideas and like the team I wanted and how like what services we're going to offer, this was like 4 or 5 years ago, right? And so like I've always um in more recent years been thinking about that seriously. And my sisters I have two sisters, and they've been great supporters of me, just through my ups and downs. And during this time when I started talking about it 4 or 5 years ago, they would just really encourage me and would talk through my ideas. And so now to um, things have come to fruition. And so looking back, it's just been kind of an interesting and wild process. But so to answer your second question, so we started the company, I started my team, or put my team together January of 2019. And last year was more so like a test of like, is this business profitable? Am I streamlining processes? Am I working well with my team as far as project management? That's a huge part of the company. Streamlining accounting, all of the various facets of that involves running a company. And so last year was more so a test. And so formally getting the LLC papers early this year. And so we've, technically formally been in business for a few months, but as far as operating, it's been a year and a half.
So you mentioned that you were looking for a team. So how did you find your team?
A lot of the people that I work with are folks that when I work with companies like A3C Festival and Conference, just Atlanta has a really dynamic and small creative community. And so doing artist management, working with like indie artists for PR, I've met a lot of people who do like graphic work, people who do video, photographers like yourself. My business partner, Richard Martin, he's a photographer, and he's been grinding with me since 2013, right? Like just like 10, 12 hours at festivals, like out in the hot sun, sweaty, smelly, like the non-glamorous side of like what we do. And he's been grinding with me for a while. So happy to say a lot of those relationships have just like organically been forged. And I genuinely like I love people, right? And so like for me, it's either those relationships I don't force. I tend to think that I'm a really good recruiter when it comes to talent. And so for me, seeing the bigger picture as to like what services we offer as a company, what I can do, what skill sets I have, and then what skill sets I don't have. And just naturally, again, organically forming those relationships. When it was time to put the team together, that was like, yo, let's get coffee. I'm starting a company. Here are our potential clients, or here are our clients. Here's what I want you to do. And, um, putting together their scope of work, putting together contracts, things like that. And so, yeah, that the team that I have around me, it's mostly been people I've known for years, and the people that I've recently known in a year or less, it's been through a friend of a friend's, or recommended by someone who I trust. So I would definitely say like that's a big thing about like the network of people. Again, here in Atlanta, it's a small, very dynamic team, dynamic group of creatives, and so we tend to look out like, hey, my homies new from New York and they do, graphic work. Do you have some work to throw their way? Like that's kind of how I operate, and how a lot of folks operate here in Atlanta, and it's served me well. I have about 8 to 9 creatives that are working on my team right now, in addition to other clients, right? Like so client management, and that kind of can get to be a lot. But playing basketball, playing sports growing up, definitely has helped where it comes to like the bigger picture, right? Because business, you have to think about your clients and your financial projections for Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, right? So like in January sometimes I'm thinking about projects and things that I'm doing for Q3 or at the end of the year, or business meetings I want to take. Like right now I'm assessing the things, with COVID-19 going on, the pandemic going on. Um, it's been a lot of changes, and for me, I'm thankful that some of my clients have kept me on, and then some have put things on pause. Hey, let's have a conversation when things kind of go back to normal, and so whatever that normalcy looks like. And so I'm in a better situation than a lot of my colleagues, thankfully. And so now I've kind of reassessed what I projected things would look like for this year. But I'm already thinking through. So for instance, a lot of what I do, I'm constantly trying to learn, right? Taking classes. Right now I'm taking some classes in SEO and digital advertising, right? Like trying to get better at that. And so doing classes right now, but then I'm also like putting money away and thinking about the things that I can do during the off season, right? So festival season and like events, especially on the East Coast, Atlanta, that abruptly ends in November. So like November slow, December slow, and January slow. Things typically start to pick back up February and March. And so for me, thinking about business wise, what are the things that am I doing right now to prepare for that lull, whether it's putting money in a savings, whether it's investing in courses so that when things are slow, I'm in the process of just constantly learning and constantly try to better myself and those around me.
I'm really glad you mentioned financial management, because I think a lot of like small business owners, such people my age, like they don't keep that in mind of the saving for when business
Right.
is low, because they always are just positive, like, oh, business is gonna be high, business is gonna be high. But when you have things like the COVID-19, it totally takes everything away. And thinking and saying in that, like, how have you rebounded from your obstacles? And I guess COVID-19 can be one of them, but just in general, have you rebounded?
Yeah. Really good question. So I describe my 20s as the turbulent 20s. I made a lot, to be transparent. Made a big mistake back in college um, in my early 20s that significantly deterred the course of my personal life or professional life as well. Um, and so my 20s, it was tough. It was chock full of a lot of just very sobering lessons, right? But thankful for me, I had my family to fall back on, right? Like, some of that involved emotionally and financially, to be totally transparent. Like my mom's held me down a lot, and my sister, Danelia, has held me down a lot in my 20s. And if it weren't for them, I honestly don't know where I'd be. And they have been like a great source of support. And with professional obstacles, right? Like, oftentimes last year, I remember I reached out to a very prominent up and coming festival, the director of that festival, and you know just sent him an email, and he got back to me within a few days. And my team and I put a proposal together, and they liked the proposal, and we went back and forth a few times, and ultimately things were looking promising for us to go to Ghana for this festival. But literally a few things didn't work out, weren't in our favor. And that contract, we ended up not going to Ghana and what have you. And so I put the better half of 2019 into building that relationship and having meetings and setting things in place for my team and I um, to do this festival, right? And things didn't work out. It was out of my control, right? And so that was an obstacle. That was a big L that I took in 2019, and several others. But I feel like those growing pains are all part of having a business, right? All part of life. Like things aren't always going to go the way that you foresee. Sometimes things are out of your control. And I've just learned to really try to um, have a takeaway, like what's the takeaway from each obstacle and each situation that I find myself in. Um, And, just looking back, personal and professional losses, it's just really made me a better businesswoman, right? Like, so, looking back on certain situations, it's like, okay, well, what could I have done differently? Again, some things are just out of your control. It's the industry, especially the music and film industry. Things change drastically and quickly, and it's fast paced, and um, there are a lot of moving parts to especially like solidifying a contract. And so I just try to look at like, okay, what did I learn from that? Like I still have a relationship with that festival director. So that's a potential thing that I can do at the end of the festival season this year, is to think about, okay, how do I reapproach this person? Is it a smaller package? Is it working remotely instead of going to Ghana for the festival? Like, there are multiple ways that you can pivot from situations like that. But then also it's just, sometimes you're not meant to work with everyone. And so, sometimes you just take that loss and, keep it moving, keep it going forward. But, I would say, like, to summarize your question, obstacles, I've had a support system, thankfully. When life has hit me hard, and I would just say, like, positive self-talk.
Wow. So you basically answered my next question, which is what is the importance of mental health and how do you like get through that? And you answered it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can touch further on, I'm Jamaican, as Cindy stated in my bio. And I think culturally, right, like Black folks, we don't typically talk about mental health and the effects that the effect that it has
Mhm.
um, within our community, right? When you talk about, just the microaggressions, right? Like, just the various amounts of things that we take on as Black men and Black women. Therapy is a way for me to be proactive, from a way for me to stay accountable, a way for me to talk through some of the trauma and some of my burdens, and a way for me to alleviate stress. And again, we don't talk about that enough in our community. And
So my one question I'm going to ask you, the last question that I really want to know is if you could say something to yourself 5 years ago, what would it be?
5 years ago.
Long time.
Oh, okay. I know. So I won't call out the company, but get it. Like, if you're a young creative, freelancer, what have you, get your agreements um like, get it in writing, your contracts. Ask questions as far as expectations or um scope of work, right? Like, what it is that's expected of you and what your work looks like for a particular contract. Get that shit in writing. I didn't do that with the company 2015, right? 5 years ago. I was a big company that's known for being predatory to Black and brown creatives, and what was verbally talked about versus the reality of my scope of work when I got to um, New York to work on that festival, drastically different, right? And I was in over my head, like, what did I get myself into, right? Called my sister and was like, yo, I want to come home. Those 8-9 hours that was expected of me, in the first 2 weeks of working that festival, was more like 14, 15 hours, right? And me getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep for those first 2 weeks, right? And so, like, for me, I would have been fine. I'm sure I would have prepared myself for that mentally, to say, hey, typically you're going to work, in the office, in a few gigs here and there in the field. But for the first 2 weeks, you're going to be grinding with us. You're going to be working more like 14, 15-hour days. But here's how we're going to make up for that. Here's how we're going to compensate you. That conversation wasn't had. And, they were slick about it. They're master manipulators. And so ultimately, I would say, like, yeah, if you're a creative, if you're a freelancer, talk through your scope of work, get that, like, everything that you talk about, get it in writing. And if you don't, like, I'm really big about, like, following your intuition, Like if something doesn't feel right, if somebody don't feel right, like if they seem shady, if you're like, I'm not really fucking with you, don't do it. Like there will be other, like especially if you're smart, if you are a grinder, if you're a go-getter, there will be other opportunities. Like, oh my god, blah 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 festival wanted to work with me, but they're talking, they're on some fuck shit. Like they don't have a budget when they have a budget, and it just doesn't sit well with you. It doesn't seem right. Keep it moving. Don't don't compromise your talents and yourself just to align yourself with a brand. Ultimately, most of these brands and most of these people do not give a fuck about you, because their mentality is like, especially with a lot of these Black owned brands, unfortunately, that mindset is like, oh, I'm going to find another graphic designer, I'm going to find another video person, I'm going to find it, which is true. But at the same time, like, if you're saying that you care about our community and you're investing in Black and brown people, there is a right way and there's a wrong way to do things. And like, we should be protecting each other, and we should be looking out for each other and making sure each other, like, we're getting paid, right? Like that's how I move, that's how I grind, and thankfully it served me well. Karma, what you put out, you're certainly going to get back. And again, that's good and bad, and I've been on both ends of it, right? um so yeah.